Okay, so this is Adam Kemp. He is originally from Essex, England, and now he's living in Grand Forks, and he is an artist. So, start off, Adam. So where did you get your original degree? Because I know you went to college
My
in
un-
England.
yeah, my undergraduate degree is from Newcastle, University of Newcastle upon Tyne,
Okay, and
a
then you
fairly traditional art school that suffered amazing cutbacks in Thatcher's Britain.
okay, and then you came
Did
over
you get that?
to America. What around what year?
Yes,
So that was when,
uh, May 19, May 1987.
and you were
Um,
working.
and I came here to help. Was helping a professor build a sculpture that stands on the corner of University Park, a big bronze sculpture. I was the cheap foreign labor on that.
And then
And then that turned into a master's degree, and then I stayed.
nice. And
That
so now you're
that sums it
currently
up, I think.
sums it up pretty good. And you're currently now like a full-time artist working in your studio where you're at right now.
Yes, yeah, I am. It's it's because there's times when it's part time, there's times when it's full time, but it's always there. It's the hours are weird, and the pay is sometimes extraordinary. When I mean extraordinary, I mean half a side of cow and a few chickens. But yeah, no, it's a full time gig for sure.
Yeah, and then
Oh,
you've
and
also
now I'm learning. Now I'm getting cyber training.
cyber training, yeah. And you've done
Cyber training. This is my cyber training.
you've done some stuff with you've done like the stuff in the summer and like
Hmm.
camps and stuff. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, all my workshops that I've done. My youngest student is 5 years old. My oldest has been 99 years old. So I've done workshops in one format or another now solidly for I think 13, 14 years. And while I was doing that, when that was going on, I also had spent time volunteering with Lutheran Social Services for an after-school program as well.
Okay.
So those programs have all taken a hit in the pandemic,
Yeah, that's kind
and
of
I worked
leads
that out.
into my questions about COVID. So I kind of am interested in
Mhm.
how COVID has affected artists, especially in this area.
Right.
So like just starting off pretty broad, like how do you think the pandemic has affected your artistic process?
Um, well, it's made me focus a little bit more. Um, and I actually, along with the pandemic, I'm also 58, so I'm sort of looking how to do things, not winding down necessarily, but my focus has changed. The pandemic just hurried that up. I regard myself now uh, as an artist in residence of the pandemic. It's the only way to look at it that makes any sense. Money wise, it's been an absolute disaster. But back, I made my first COVID piece at the end of December 2019. By the end of January 2020, I had decided, after listening to scientists, that essentially this was going to go on for 2, 3, 4 years. I told everybody my workshops were canceled for 1 year. I was lying. I knew they were canceled for at least two. A lot of the people I deal with are very vulnerable health wise. And a lot of the people I work with are served by people who may or may not have protocol in place as well. So, what I had to do is, for the sake of my own home life, I had to shut down anything that would increase the risk. So mathematically, I looked at it and thought I got to find something to do for 3 or 4 years that makes enough money to keep the shop open. And is the shop going to stay open, or the studio going to stay open? And those are questions I still deal with that question every day. The focus, what it's taught me is that maybe I don't even need a studio anymore. I'm moving towards larger public works. All that could be done on a computer, which I'm horrendously ill-equipped to use. That is changing. But my regular sources of income are dried up. So what it forced me to do is look for new buyers, which also meant I have to drastically reduce my prices. Virus vibrancy, I call it, pandemic pilfering. I also had to be aware of other people's predatory behaviors financially, and I suffered from one of those. One person ripping me off. So a lot of the plans I made right away changed, and the nature of the pandemic is every plan you make will be attacked and destroyed within a month. The pandemic means there's going to be casualties, there's going to be losses. The disease is one small part of it. You need to prepare, and you need to kind of have a long-term plan. And for somebody that normal life organization is a real challenge, I sort of surprised myself really by thinking, okay, what do I got to do to get through this? And one of the first lessons that you have to deal with is, what do I actually have? And that's been really interesting, trying to work out, trying to understand if my creative process has any more depth left. I've compromised some stuff I've done over the years to have commercial sales. I'm much more of a conceptual artist than I realized. There's all these things that are going on the whole time. So what the pandemic did is it actually allowed me to get rid of some stuff, but it also meant the money I would make in a year disappeared in 2 weeks. And what do? Well, you hustle, you have to sell, you have to engage, you have to find a way to stay open, you have to look at your costs. Some things I've gotten rid of, some pieces I've said that I would never sell, I've sold. I've had to cold call people that owed me a little money, and this is going to go on for another year and a half.
So has that changed what type of art
Effectively,
or are you still?
Yeah, it has a little bit. It's made me focus on the stuff that is more fun, and it's made me stop making excuses and do some bigger works. Right? You yourself have participated in one of those. Mm-hmm. So now it's about me trying to create opportunities to for other artists and myself to find a way to keep going.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the other things
we were lucky.
Touch on, because how do you predict your art will change post-COVID, and how do you think art in general is going to shift?
Well, you got to get experience. There's a mathematic principle. It is essentially, if you're functioning as an artist in COVID and you manage to survive, the pressure of dealing with a worldwide pandemic is either going to crush you or it's going to sharpen your work. Once you understand the scientific construct of what we're dealing with, you then get to feed off that and do what you can to respond to it. Meanwhile, you also have to have an engaging, it's very draining. You have to have an engaging relationship with your work. Otherwise, as that pressure comes to you from the social construct part of the pandemic, in other words, people complaining that they can't go to restaurants and all that stuff, that could be disabling. Or you can use your creativity to shield yourself from it and still make work that engages the public. I didn't come to art because I fit in well in the first place. So my empathy for people living on the fringe and trying to make good has come in very useful. But there's pressure there, and you have to accept it. And you can decide to engage with it or not. So you can take something bad and see something good in it, but that is also physically and emotionally very draining. And one of the things you have to do once in a while is just walk away and say, this is total. And then you come back to it, and go, okay, where am I going to go? But I think for me personally, it's made me sharpen up. Like today I was going to go buy a stretcher for a piece. I've actually got to go back to the customer and say, I need a down payment, because my daily function, the money I've got lying around, well, actually I don't have any lying around, for daily function has tightened up. That's almost disappeared. So every job I do is a private one right now. there's at least 50 or not 75% down, or it doesn't happen. In fact, the first question I have for people is, do you have any money? And if they don't have any, I'm like, well, okay, then, this commission is over.
Yeah, so
Uh,
it's made you sharper and like more,
right.
not defensive is the right word, but more like focused on what you're trying to get out of
Right.
the process as an artist.
Now, the parallel to that in your own creative process is the pressure that comes from being part of a global pandemic means that you get better at if you've got the training, you get better at making creative decisions a lot more quickly, because the time that you had to wallow in not making that decision, which is fun, has gone. It's like, am I going to get this piece done today? And that's interesting, because it's a little bit like drawing without an eraser. You do a lot of thinking before you get into something, and that's actually quite exciting. But I will say that the dealing with the economic elements of it has been really tough.
Mhm.
I but I also have shelter. I have a reasonably priced studio. I have water at home. I have a loving wife and a loving kid. I'm doing actually okay. Um, but it's you got to understand the dynamic first. I mean, one of the mistakes we made earlier on is, I mean, I actually have told some younger artists this: you got to make a plan. This is 3 or 4 years. And the worst
Yeah,
case scenario is you plan to be in a situation for 3 or 4 years, and it turns into 2 years because of a vaccine. So people, and it doesn't matter if you're well educated or not, people are responding to information they get on a daily basis, when actually the science of this was laid out at the beginning. I have one advantage. Well, I actually have two. I have one advantage. When I hear news coming through an American prism, when I first heard that China, whoops, have found something going wrong in Wuhan, and the Chinese government said that the regional government of Wuhan had made a mistake. When I hear that news from an American prism, I times it by 10. It's like, okay, I'm hearing this American centric version of the news. Let's go find out what the story is. So as an immigrant, I listen to all news, mainstream news, like, yeah, okay, so it's kind of a deal in China. That means it's a fucking big deal in China, and it's coming if it's not already here. When
yeah,
I hear about, for example, oh, they found this different strain of the virus in England and South Africa and Brazil, it's like, it's already here, and it's bigger and it's worse. And I
yeah,
have that because I didn't grow up with this fascination of humanizing the news all the bloody time. It's like the most interesting news is the news is not human. It's the
yeah,
science. And the science was really clear in the beginning. Like, this is a problem. We don't know what we're doing. And now we don't know how long the vaccine is going to live. Ultimately, the only conclusion is, until we develop herd immunity, which is a big if, we're living with this. This is going to be like a
yeah.
flu.
Well, I think you responded to that right away because when I first started working with you, that was
Mhm.
right before the pandemic started.
Yeah.
And right when it started, you're like, we gotta start making art about this. I mean,
Right.
we
Right.
did the we sewed the big mask for the blue head. We did
Yes.
a lot of
Um,
paintings about it. The
right.
mask up ones, yeah, like
Right.
I think do you think it's important to like record that or is it more important
I,
just to respond to what's happening in your work?
both. I think that this is such a size we're so close to this seismic shift, which has also happened with other seismic shifts related. I mean, we can't ignore the social justice part of this discussion. We can't ignore the chance of a political narrative changing. And on top of that, we have the seismic shift that has made so many people look at their priorities. The social part of that, the cultural part of that is just beginning. In the beginning, I thought it was really funny that everybody was like, oh, I'm going to do a Zoom concert. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And thank goodness for Zoom. But that to me is like, okay, that's your foundation year of art. What are you going to do when you've been in this thing for 3 or 4 years? The
Mhm.
discussion has changed. Our ability to be intimate with technology and intimate with each other through technology has improved, but has also changed in focus. That's going to produce some interesting work. Whether that work is directly referential of the virus itself, I don't know. it's hard to compete artistically with the amazing work that people are doing in science discovering this thing. And all the scientists have said, we're still dealing with so many unknowns. So the construct in which you lived as an artist before has totally changed. Yet there's some remnants of the past, such as industry, that are still there. So yeah, it's going to produce some work one way or the other. I think um, it will produce some work that challenges the work that has already been made. I mean, I'm still waiting for someone to do. It might be me, a piece where we smash to pieces a piano playing meaningful music somewhere, because I've heard enough of sentimental bloody piano music. But anyway, um, so what does that do to you as an artist? Well, you have something that some other people don't have. You have the ability to sit back and go, "How's my game changed?" And
Yeah.
mine has.
Yeah.
I
So
don't even recognize how much it's changed right now. I'm still dealing with, like, how do I pay rent? How do I do this? How do I do that? Meanwhile, there's this clear direction evolving for me, which has been because of the pandemic.
what is that clear direction like? Where do you see your art and
Well,
yourself in like a couple years, maybe post
okay,
COVID?
so I think I'm hoping that I build a team of people that can do large. One of the things that we have in this state and this part of the world is we have space. Um, so I think there's a unique opportunity to make pieces that allow people to walk at them, be in them, visit them on their own time with their space in a relatively safe environment. Some people have a fear or a healthy note of caution about dealing with a disease. So I think it's a chance to build expansive pieces outside and make them available to people in a public works format so that there's something for people to go look at and deal with.
Are you thinking more like permanent works like the mural we did by the police station,
The
or
mural
like
is good. Yes,
performative stuff like with like the
both.
piano?
There's room for, well, okay, so what is permanent? Yes, the first part of the answer to your question is yes, more work like that. But I've been working on driftwood flood pieces now for 15 years.
And your ice
Yeah,
sculptures
and
and
the nice
stuff?
stuff.
Yeah.
And I make it every year. So is that permanent or impermanent?
How
Yeah.
has the North Dakota environment impacted you and you as an artist? And maybe
Well,
even
environment
developed
wise,
you as an artist?
I would say the landscape and the weather is totally affected my work. As far as the art scene goes, to be honest with you, I don't even think I'm part of it. I just do what I do. I'm a small business. Um, I it's hard to explain, but I don't actually think in terms of art scene. And I've been here since 1987. I made my first public work in 1987. I had exhibitions down by the river in 1989, 1988. I've never not participated in public art or public works piece. One of the biggest battles around here, of course, and I've taken this, the pandemic has reinforced this change. I've taken a slightly different attitude about this. People are not used to paying realistic prices for work. Uh, I've been the worst offender of sometimes selling my work too cheaply because I need cash, and that has devalued the work. And then what happens is then people think that's the value of the work. One of the problems that we have with creativity as a society, not all elements of society, by the way, but a lot of society doesn't want to pay enough for it.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that is um, it's my grandmother theory. I blame the grandmothers because little Brittany or Kyle goes over to Brittany grandma's house, and grandma gives them a meat pie or a quilt that they spent their whole life learning to be brilliant at, and they just take it and think that's how it should be. And pretty much that's what you deal with as you get as an adult, is people are expecting to get it for nothing. And then what I really like is everybody reduces it to this passive aggressive stuff, which I kind of get a kick out of, is, oh, I'm doing you a favor by letting you hang my work on your wall. I mean, since when did that build a positive creative relationship with
Yeah.
anybody? You're not doing anybody any favors. In fact, all you're doing, if you're not supporting that artist, is saying this person does it for free. Now, that's funny coming from me because my work is all over the place. The goal now is to, as I'm dealing with bigger and bigger projects, is to somehow elevate pricing so that when I'm done or when I die, there's room for somebody else to be paid decent money. It's not it's not necessarily, I'm not thinking in terms of legacy, because I think legacy is kind of bullshit. It's terms of, I don't want anybody to have to work as hard as I did to get paid reasonably. They should be able, if they're any good, they should be able to make a living out of this.
Yeah.
But art in the public domain is a really interesting issue because everybody, the first thing people, my own personal favorite is when someone says, well, I don't really know what good art is. And then they spend an hour telling you what they think good art is.
Yeah, it gets real.
And you deal with that in the public, but that's also a battle that you choose to take on. So what I've tried to do is get slightly better at the politics of it.
Well, maybe so you've talked about like how it is in this area, but like what about the online environment? Because that's totally different. Because you kind of connect with people you wouldn't usually talk to that even might be from around here or maybe not.
Right. So the online part of it is you have to decide what your relationship is with the online entity. Are you going to use it to complement yourself to make money? Or are you, so you have to find something that's small and sellable, or I'm now looking at how do I get people online to say support a mural I want to do next summer or a sculpture. And there are vehicles for that. You as an artist get to decide what your relationship's going to be. And right now I use it as a giant sketchbook, and I'm basically using it as a way to find out how I want to do a website. And that's how I use it. But you have to decide what your relationship is, because I actually think you could, as an artist, just make, well, I know you can, so just sell stuff online or sell yourself as an artist online. I think there's various sites that allow you to do that.
Yeah, so, it's becoming bigger
right.
and bigger thing. I know we've talked about you starting a website, and it is kind of a daunting process.
Yeah, no, that's it. And it's not something I want to do in a rush because I still don't know what I wanted to do yet.
Yeah, and then
I may already be doing it, and then I just have to change what I do on other social media platforms and move that over to a website.
Yeah, and even like they're starting to converge. So even like Instagram could just be your website almost. Is how.
Yeah, but I also want
to have like your own site.
I don't necessarily want to step away, but you know, Instagram was what Facebook wanted to be, and I think TikTok and whatever comes next is what Instagram wishes it was. And they did it with real, I mean, there's a lot of things that are changing in the structure of Instagram that is moving it. And, you know, you've got to go in and you've got to edit, and you've got to build up your own following platforms in there.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The page can be a mess. So I think a website allows you to focus more how you want to be as an artist, maybe. Instagram is fun though. I mean, it's a village, you know, there's some horrible people on it. There's some really interesting people on it. And it is a fun way to engage. But to me, I have to watch it because it creates the illusion. I love engaging with it. I ain't communicating, but it is a sketchbook. And at some point, I'm either going to make that whole package a product, or like you say, I'm going to combine it with something else. But the website's got to do a certain thing, because if I actually do the website I want to do, I wouldn't even have a studio. I can do everything off a computer and I'm done. I just need somewhere once in a while to, you know, my work, but I don't need the studio that I have.
Is there any more you want to say about like your art you're working on currently?
Right now I'm at the planning stage for a metal piece of sculpture, and at the planning stage for a large mural. So it's really very boring. It's just sketchbooks, and I've got to draw something so people know what I'm trying to do, which I hate doing that.
Yeah.
so What? Yeah, I got to tell you what I got to do, and then you can tell me whether I've done it or not. Okay, I have that argument with myself every time I pick up a pencil.
So that's
Sharpie.
for
I
that's
sketch with Sharpie.
so that's for something else though, or someone else, or is that for you?
Yeah, well, it will be for the city. I'm going to try and get private funding for it. I've maintained editorial control to a certain extent.
What parts of North Dakota art do you think need to be highlighted more, or even like what's some stuff that you anything you'd like to talk about regarding North Dakota art?
Well, I think we need to label our successes. We have an extraordinary collection of public works throughout the state, and we don't do a good enough job of letting people know where it's at. But then we don't do a good enough job of letting people know, the fantastic bridges we have, the fantastic energy story that exists down 200. Um, we're not that good at, I think the consulting term is animating our successes. But
Yeah.
for example, right now, downtown Grand Forks, we don't have any labels out. We have a very poor record of labeling what people have achieved. We have the
Mhm.
space to do interesting things here. The question we should be asking ourselves is, why aren't we doing more? But I also want to tell people, remember, this is a community that built a wooden ski jump in Lincoln Park and a practice ski jump in Lincoln Park. I mean, we can build stuff here, and I just wish we'd have a bit more fun with the sculptural element from a very self-serving point of view, which is it's fun to do, and I want to be paid well to do it. Um, but that's also a battle. How you can't get frustrated when my job now is to encourage people who have the money and the government bodies and state bodies and city bodies who have the money to spend a little bit more than they're used to spending on having public works. But
Yes,
it's going
yeah.
to be part of our future, whether we like it or not. It's also an economic, um, it's an economic language, and if we don't complete the process of labeling stuff and providing maps for people to enjoy these things, whether they're digital or not, we're not finishing a crucial part of the economic equation.
Yeah, I know that there's
And
a
when I say
previous
economics, I also mean,
student made a
go ahead.
map of a previous student made a map of art in North Dakota, like different sculpture parks and such, but that's like one of the
Yeah.
few things I've heard of that
Right,
happening. Maybe we need to focus more on
right,
highlighting the arts,
right,
especially during this time when people can go
right.
enjoy outdoor sculpture and such.
Exactly. And we have a unique opportunity. People are looking at things differently. They're looking at what they may have taken for granted. Um, and we can change that. And as an artist, we have a unique perspective on how to change that. But one of the every artist hopes their work speaks so well and pleasantly and vibrantly that it doesn't need a label. But the thing that people look at when they go to a museum is the label because
Hmm.
it's the keystone. It's the
Yeah, sometimes.
invitation to look at the piece. It's a way for you to ground your own bias, your own pathetic understanding of historical context. But if you don't label it, people aren't going to know. And that's coming from me to label things. So that's also something I'm looking at too, which is there's one piece I have behind a business here. I want to put a new label on because of how it was made and where it came from. It's a historical monument. Right now, this looks like rebar and rock. It isn't. It's a every piece in there has a relationship with one part of North Dakota and building projects downtown. So unless we make the effort in the arts to take ourselves more seriously and label it from this point of view of success, then I don't know that we can expect society as a whole to do it. And unfortunately, I don't think local chambers, local economic development people even see it within the purview of something they need to do. So that's something that we're going to have to sort out ourselves within the arts.
Yeah.
I like this, I like the region. Um, I like doing the ice work. I like painting with the cold. I like building sculpture with the cold. Yeah. And we haven't had a cold winter yet. So
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go further north.
Well, that's super interesting
No,
about the label stuff.
I'm
And
not
yeah, I
going
think
further north. I've had enough. I'm 58.
you're yeah, I
Like,
think we definitely do have to do a better job highlighting it and getting people um maybe not involved in making art, but
so
involved
one of the
in
questions,
viewing art.
without delving into, without promoting the idea of too much ego, I think as an artist, sometimes in a region where you don't necessarily get totally embraced, you can waste a lot of time second guessing your own value. And what I would say to the arts is stop it. We're valuable. You know, this idea that somehow people are waking up to the idea that we're part of the economic story, to me is laughable. It's like, I'm sorry, you're telling me something that I knew when I was 4 years old. You know, oh, you know, arts are part of the neighborhood. You think? I've paid rent downtown since 1989. I know I'm part of the neighborhood. You know, so that discussion is a waste of time. What is interesting about the pandemic is that discussion is happening on a worldwide stage. Our ability to be creative is helping us deal with the emotional stress. Uh, and it doesn't matter if you're materially comfortable or not. It's a very stressful environment right now. It's allowing us to deal with things that also allows us to give other people some joy so that they can have something to be less stressed about.
Yeah.
So I think I think we need to label and pay better money for creativity.
Yeah, and especially in a
If I
place
said that
where
answer in the beginning, then the interview could have been a lot shorter.
yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And yeah, the um especially in a place where we kind of are a little bit more isolated in general,
Yeah,
and now with the
yeah.
pandemic, I think art should be even more important now,
Well, it
um
is.
to
Whether
engage
whether whether
people.
people
And
think it is or it isn't, it is.
mm,
And people can talk about it all they want, but the fact of the matter, the creative process is here. People are doing it every day. It is important. Is it more important than some other things? Maybe, maybe not. But it is important. You know, it's a tool you can use to entertain children when they're having a hard time with school, music, acting, everything. People who have a creative hobby, it's keeping them sane. We are collectively being creative. We just haven't labeled it that way. So I would argue right now with young people like yourself, there's a whole school of North Dakota regional artists coming up that are going to hopefully um, benefit from the work that people like myself and other artists of my age have done. We've made it more acceptable and we've got more work out there than the previous generation did. Yep.
do you have any final thoughts on like your own artwork, like the basic forms of it, and like how you want to keep making art? Like, is there any
Well,
other
right now,
things you'd like to say?
one of the things I'm doing to understand where my painting and sculpture could go, and if I'm actually going to do painting or sculpture anymore, because I like the planned obsolescence even more. I like things not lasting. I like the ephemeral, which is fairly common in people getting older. It's like I'm going to go, so I want to make sure my work goes with me. I'm actually going through about 100 old drawings and paintings that I did, where I drew very intensely when I first started to embrace the cold and the winter and the snow. And I'm going back through those and trying to finish them. So I'm trying to tidy up some loose ends while I think about the next big phase. And it's going to be a very brutal choice. I love doing sculpture and I love doing painting, but I got to ask myself, and it doesn't have to be an either or, but as you get physically older, you got to decide where you're going to focus your energies. And I'm asking myself right now, where do I want to go? And it's an
And
interesting choice. I
are
get
you
people
going?
want,
Is it something
I
you
mean,
feel like you have to make a choice? Like if you're either gonna
yes,
do painting,
yes.
sculpture,
And
or
yeah, you've got to make a choice because you ultimately have got to get one to a level where you can live off it. And
yeah.
whether that's large public murals or large public sculpture,
So what's the
I don't
not
know.
long lasting?
I I've enjoyed making small props for some of my videos. I'm wondering if the videography stuff isn't somewhere to go. Um, I've enjoyed making large pieces that then really just exist for a social media presence and then get washed away every year. But I also know uh, I, I've painted throughout all of this, and the, there's a relationship there with the painting that's actually pulling me quite back in, and that may be where I end up. The the element of this which is important is for about a month I resisted making a decision because I thought I want to do it all. And then I thought, well, wait a minute. One day I'm going to die. I don't necessarily want to die like while waking up, going every day. I was going to do it all. I want to. Do I want to end my painting career by being more in depth and getting to know something? And the beginning of my creative process was painting, and it's still there. So in a strange way, all the experimentation might end up taking me back to the most traditional part of what I do.
Well, maybe it'll take you back and give you what you've been looking for in your painting all this time.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like
Right,
all
right, right.
a
Right.
combined
Well, it's
process.
all part. Okay, so every sculpture, everything I've made, every incident I've been a part of is all part of a larger palette. Um, the cold, my favorite colors are cold, indifference, doubt, black coffee, and music. Right. So everything that I do has all those different references in it. You've just got to sharpen it up so that it evolves beyond the individual ingredients and gets to something that it will surpass what you expected or not. I mean, failure is also another favorite color. And so I think one of the things that I've realized is as I've been dealing with some of the harsh financial aspects of the pandemic, creating in the pandemic, has also made me realize that there's a decision I need to make. And it's it's a tough one. It's like, okay, I've got, I'm always talking about editing. Every picture I take, I try and edit before I take it. Uh, and now I have to bring that lens, that editing scalpel to myself and say, what am I going to get rid of to keep going? Because you establishing a relationship with the creative process, I recommend everybody does a little bit of everything. And I've been doing that for a long time. Now maybe it's like, okay. And it's actually quite funny. It's like, well, my brother does some sculpture stuff. Maybe I'll let him do that. I'll just do the painting. I mean, you have those conversations, but the refreshing part of it is you suddenly realize the harsh reality of having to make that decision. There's an
Yeah.
element to this conversation which is important, which is years ago, Tom Clifford took a chance on me, and
And
um,
who's Tom Clifford again?
Tom Clifford was uh, what was the president of UND at the time,
And you
and
were getting your MFA.
yep, he took a chance on me, and I actually told him, okay, I'm going to stay and finish the sculpture, although I wasn't making any money on it. And I also said, well, I'm going to take a chance on the town, and um, that is still part of my creative story. When I became a father, um, the second part of that story is I built a village around Hannah. And that's arguably one of the greatest installations I've done, which is that we live 10 minutes from downtown. She can walk downtown with me, used to be able to go to a coffee bar and feel like she's part of she's not feeling like it. She is part of the community. And I the help and recognition that we got from the school system, from the people that helped her, was absolutely stunning and world class. And I looked at the community. I thought, if the community can give me this, I can keep giving back. And I don't normally, it's not a quid pro quo thing, but as a parent of a special needs child, to know that there's a second village there that loves and respects that child, I mean, that was mind blowing to me. I was absolutely floored by that. So that actually reinvigorated another part of what I do. It also made me rent a studio space so she could be dropped off of school every day. So that was actually a help. That was actually a childcare cost that we tried to get rid of. We did get rid of it, and that also made me think about, okay, so I went on this building spree. I built all kinds of things. So, and then in relation to what I was saying earlier, is I think I'm done, not necessarily with building in that regard, but the building is going to be in a painting format, I think. And it sort of goes back to that. I created an environment where she felt safe, where her mother would trust me with her, all these kind of glorious things that happened. And, that was part of the studio and everything else I did. That has changed. The pandemic has meant that I'm more at home. I'm in a bubble to a certain extent, although clearly not today. But it's you you take that and go, oh, that's a phase of my work. I've had to accept about the pandemic is it's wiped out a whole bunch of stuff. Like I was building this sort of moving train of younger. I mean, I worked with kids every summer. Literally, there was organic teaching camps program I've been building, and kids that I know now who are young people talk to me about what they did in that sculpture camp and all this stuff, and they're all about creative process and not actually about. That's all gone. That whole organic construct is wiped out. One of the things you have to accept as an artist is, and I said it in the beginning, there's a pandemic, there's going to be casualties. Accept and label the casualty and move on. I mean, I cried about it because I suddenly realized over a 2-day period, holy shit, all that work, all that groundswell, all that communicating with parents, all that trying to build up alternative funding, all that use of materials. I mean, half the year I would spend putting recycled and repurposed materials together for this week-long workshop, and then another one up by Stump Lake and all this kind of stuff. That's all wiped out, and it got wiped out last year, and a good chance it's going to be wiped out again this year. And that's part of the pandemic. The relief is I looked at it from a point of view, and I was saying, well, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do that, and I stopped myself and saying that's a waste of time. You need to accept that it's gone, and then we're either going to do it differently or you're going to be something else. And
improve
that's
upon
a tough
it,
decision.
I'm guessing.
Right. And it's a hard decision. It's a hard acceptance. It's not a decision. The decision's being made for you by a virus. And one of the things I will tell artists is you've got to learn to accept what the pandemic has taken away. And we have some weapons to deal with that. And one of them is technology. And the other one is most of the people we know have access to clean drinking water.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, clean water or drinking water, whatever. And so we have some tools of liberation.
Yeah.
And
So
the question then becomes, it's about what we can do.
Yeah.
What's that?
It'll be an interesting process, but
yes,
I think we'll come out with new things and better things from it all. So,
well, you will come out with new things. It's whether or not you're invested in them or not. We are inventive creatures, and we will find a way to deal with things, but it's not going to be what it was, and we shouldn't expect it to. We were warned. This virus was a mathematical certainty. And whatever anybody says to you, it's like, no, you got to have a plan for another year or so. And do you really want to go back to if I go back to where I was, I'm accepting that I only get paid so much per square foot for something, which I need to be paid 4 times for to survive. So no, I don't want to go back to that. Old normal did not like what it had become. So it left.
now we're in the new normal, and we'll see where that
And this is so funny. As an artist, this is what I enjoy about creativity, and it doesn't apply to every creative person, but on the whole, we are pretty good at going, oh, it's changed. What am I going to
Mhm.
do now? Because, and here's the thing, I ran out of white paint this morning, which I don't even want to admit as a painter, because if you're any good, you should not have to use white paint, whatever. But anyway, and I'm like, oh my God, I knew this was going to happen. And it derailed my whole painting morning till I'm going to paint it with blue paint.
Yeah.
As an artist, especially if you've got limited income, you need to be good and quick at going, oh, it's all changed. Uh-oh. And
Mhm.
and what we also have is those anxieties that people have on a large scale right now, we have every day in the studio. I mean, I've been saying to my wife since, well, oh God, geez, how long? Uh-oh. Um, for I suppose 15 years plus. Even when she was my girl, what are you going to do today? I'm going to go find money,
Mhm.
and my artwork is a way to do that. So I think one of the things that's happened is you're going to see different work as people accept that this is now what we're living with. We have some things here which we need to take advantage of, which is space. We could have the largest sculpture garden in the world if we wanted to. We're just
Mhm.
choosing not to. And my
Mhm.
question always is, people say, well, why should we? And my answer to that is, why shouldn't we? What else? What else? What's the difference between making a large sculpture garden and putting in frisbee golf? It's the same tools, So that's my challenge right now, is about changing that dynamic. And in
Yeah.
some ways, I've been successful. Some ways, I've made it worse. The painting is separate. The painting language, to a certain extent, that's going to be a little bit more isolated. So, but there's politics in everything I do, for sure,
Mhm.
and that the pandemic has made that abundantly clear.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah,
Well,
I'm excited. Meeting you and working with you has reminded me, okay, this is where we need to go. This is what we need to do. This is how we're going to get there. Yeah. But
doing
so
our how so like involving younger artists in
also
here or what?
there's a glaring injustice here. Not only do we not have enough indigenous people involved in process, we don't have enough women involved in creative process, and yet who do we rely on always to help organize stuff and volunteer at arts things, whatever? This local regional art scene needs to be dominated by women, and I'm going to do whatever I can because it's your guys' turn. It's like, and I told some of my male artist friends, one in particular, who said, well, you mean just because they're women? I'm like, yeah, just because. It's time for that dynamic to change. So I'm actually, with some exhibitions or some digital exhibitions, I'm slowly but surely trying to change my focus as far as the art, managing art beyond my studio goes, which is, getting work in, like, I'm slowly but surely replacing all the work we have in the coffee shop. It's all going to be women's art. Okay. So an element of what you do as an artist is there's a perception that you work alone, individual, blah, blah, blah. And one of the greatest leap forwards I made uh, was understanding that I was part of a team. The team is my wife, uh, Tanya, and Hannah, and it was the dogs as well, um, and a lot of other people that I've worked with. Once you understand that, it's very liberating. My wife was very patient with me as I came to understand Hannah's quality of life and what could be done. And she believed in my ability to make it work, and it did. But she's also um, a very accurate and tough critic, and that really cuts down on what I call the weepy time, where you're like, oh, I thought it was way better than that, whatever. There's a lot of learning not to feel sorry for yourself, and that comes from having a good critic. That has played a large part. Um, but one of the highlights was, other than actually getting married in a park that they've destroyed, improved, was I did a big piece that got transferred onto the side of a bus. And Hannah had drawn 100 stick figures of her mum in it, and they were a bit naughty because they had breasts and a butt on it. I told my wife, said, you're on the side of a public transportation bus. You got to come and see this. And the picture was, I think, 40 feet long. It was at the 3rd Street Gallery. And right in one corner, there was a little space, really. And we did an opening, and one of Hannah's friends, Lindsay, turned up. And I went to my wife and said, wouldn't it be great if Hannah finished this piece with a portrait of Lindsay, because Hannah does these stick portraits and they're delightful. And my wife looked at me and I thought, oh my God, she's beaten me again, right? I mean, there's competition between us all the time. I can't even play Scrabble with her without a knife. It's just fierce. But she looked at me and said, she's already done it. Hannah had taken upon herself to get a Sharpie and draw a little picture of her friend Lindsay. That then got transposed into the biggest PDF file ever, and then vinyl transposed onto the side of a bus. As I told my wife, I say, you did that. The fact that you took joy and allowed me to go this direction with her, you did that. And I could not have done this without you. We then managed to get her father, my father-in-law, down to look at the bus and come and check it out. And he thought it was funny. He said, and he looked at us and said, you three, and just shook his head, right? I mean, it was a compliment. I couldn't have had that moment unless I accepted I was part of the team. And the team at that point was all the special needs family. Actually, there were, in the end, 29 special needs adults and children that had actually worked on that piece. But you're part of that team. You're going to be better as an individual if you accept that you're always part of that team. Even when you're at your most solitudinal, your creative work and your creative process is attached to a team. In fact, you're only going to improve if you accept that that's developing because of other people. And that ego management is something that I owe a lot of thanks to my wife for. It wouldn't be possible if, well, who knows what would have happened. But the fact that she recognized right away that she'd won because she was there and saw Hannah do the drawing was like, oh my God, how much is that worth? The freedom part of that whole story is, and people laugh when I say this, I looked at the whole situation. We'd had over 400 people that contributed to this huge drawing. Hannah had done 100 pieces of it, was not intimidated by the scale of the work. She'd done a portrait of a fellow special needs young adult at that point and ruled the piece and told me it was done. And then we got it onto the side of a bus. My point about the whole story is my wife still lives with me, or I still live with her, and she knows full well that I peaked at that point professionally. I don't have any right to expect to be more successful than I was at that moment. And that enjoyment comes with the support of somebody like her, Tanya. And it's hard to explain to people, but that teamwork, even when it was chalk and cheese, and she was making fun of me for having an idea that her and Hannah already thought of and done and completed. I mean, that's hilarious. And it's funny. It's a big part of my work. That actual moment was like, okay, I've gotten as high as I need to go. Now, how are we going to go down the other side? And people say, well, what do you mean? You're going to do better than that. I'm like, no, the liberation is I don't need to do better than that. So I can stop playing that game. Let's do something bigger and better. And that was really interesting because everybody involved with the process got it. And that, that's teamwork, which is really interesting because a lot of people think you're an artist and you don't do it. So no, I'm totally dependent upon my team, which sometimes can be baristas, but it's the wife really, when I think about it.
That's awesome.
But don't tell me I said that. Okay. Then she's won again, damn it.
That's really cool.
And she would say, she's Norwegian heritage. So she would say, oh, no, it's not about me winning. I'm like, yeah, no, that's what people say who are winning. That's never said by losers. That's said by people who are winning effortlessly. Effortlessly. Thank you. Anyway, so you can put that in there.